Right, so first of all, who is this guy and why is he going to talk about novel food? First of all, he's not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer by education. I'm not a lawyer by practicing law. So my perspective will be rather a practical point of view, not a legal advice. I'm not going to give you some loopholes in the legal meaning or whatever. I've been in the cannabis industry for 20 years now, starting as a recreational marijuana policy advocate, turned into farmer, hemp farmer, turned into business person. I started my first company in 2014, so it's going to be 10 years now, and I've been actually the first Polish company awarded a license to grow, process, and do everything with hemp. So it's 10 years that I'm actually doing what I'm talking about. And from my perspective, novel food does not apply to hemp, period. And that could be the end of this presentation, but I will go further into details. The main part of my presentation, or rather a speech, not a presentation, the presentation will be just some extracts from the ruling that we got last year, which is absolutely groundbreaking when it comes to Poland. It has some implications when it comes to Europe, but essentially it has very far-reaching implications when it comes to understanding the logic of European Commission, if there is any. I had around 1 billion plants under my curation. I mean, 1 hectare is 1 million plants when it comes to hemp, so I know what I'm talking about. And in 2018, I actually sold my previous company that was dealing with CO2 extraction and making the products vertically integrated, growing, processing, making the end products. And it was already back then when we entered some kind of fight with the regulator when it comes to sanitary rules. Either novel food, either THC, either what is CBD doing in food, and etc. I'm a strong advocate of selling CBD products as dietary supplements. That's the best category possible. It's not a medicinal product. It's not a do not consume me product. It's not an oral hygiene product as they're selling it in some places. It is a dietary supplement. It supplements your diet in cannabinoids. So despite the fact that in many jurisdictions it's actually easier to sell CBD products as not intended for human consumption, with a wink, it is a good classification. Right now, I'm running Kombinat Konopny, which is a vertically integrated company. I floated somehow to fiber. For 3 or 4 years now, I'm mostly devoted to growing for fiber, developing new technologies of processing it for fiber. The reason why I'm still talking about novel food is that CBDs are actually the things that are financing my growth in fiber varieties. So, as I mentioned, these are all sources of inspiration, not legal advice. A brief history of the ruling itself. I will start from the end. Last year, we've got from the highest possible authority in Poland a very clear ruling that hemp is not bounded by novel food restriction, which means that any court in Poland has to take into account that I am not in violation of any novel food restrictions because of implementing hemp flowers, and I will talk about a bit more about that later on, because you will be seeing this product throughout the presentation, because that's what the ruling was all about. I introduced it in 2019 by way of avoiding my non-compete clause, because when I sold my last company, I was not allowed to sell CBD extracts. So my thinking went, well, if I cannot sell CBD extracts, maybe I will sell CBD in its natural form, as a flower. If you're not a patient that needs hundreds of milligrams per day, you can actually eat the flower itself. If it's decarboxylated and if it has a tiny bit of oil, your body will do the extraction. You can actually eat the flower and get all the cannabinoids you need into your body. So what we did is just a very simple product, decarboxylated hemp, obviously standardized for a specific amount of CBD. It's like 5 milligrams per capsule. So for the everyday user, because what we realized is when I started in 2014, most CBD users were patients, oncological patients, neurological patients. And later on, it turned out it's rather a natural stress relief, a sleep aid, not a medicine. It was something like valerian or lemon balm. So we decided to blend the 3 ingredients that people know to help them alleviate their stress. And one additional reason to do it, you cannot use any health claims for cannabis, for hemp, whatever. It doesn't do anything according to the regulators. But if you add valerian to your product, you can actually say that the product helps you with your stress because of the valerian. It actually helps you because of the cannabinoids. But legally speaking, in order to be able, the zioła na dobry nastrój means herbs for a good mood. So if you want to get yourself somehow relaxed, you just take that product and at a given dose, it will help you alleviate your stress. But that's thanks to valerian. The moment we registered it as a dietary supplement in all European countries, you either have to fulfill some requirements or you need to make a notification to a chief sanitary inspectorate in Poland. So we did that. 2 months later, we received a letter saying that if I continue doing it, I will go to prison for 2 years because of violation of novel food rules. Every single company in Poland receives this letter. It's completely a lack of legal power, and the authority that is sending it, they are perfectly aware of it, but they are using something that one of the ex-FDA employees recently told me in Colorado, poisoning the well. They were told as officials to use this tactic of poisoning the well, meaning throwing arguments at the company that they know they're not true, but they are actually trying to make this image that this company is somehow bad. So that's what they're doing with cannabis, with hemp. At least in Poland, because that's where I'm based, that's where I'm running a company, but I imagine that the same story goes for all the other countries, at least in the European Union. So what we did, instead of being frightened by the letter saying we need to go to jail for 2 years because of that, we kept the product on the market and we countersued the agency. Because like for thousands of years, everyone understood that the best way of protecting yourself is actually attacking. So you have to do it with the regulator. If you are right, obviously if you're wrong, better not. But we were right. The Novel Food Directive does not apply to hemp products with a asterisk, to natural hemp products. And a lot of products on the market are not natural. I would consider we don't have this problem in Europe much, but in the US they all have those derivatives, delta 8, delta 10, HCO, whatever. Those are novel foods, if they're food at all. But those are not traditional compounds of our diet. So we were pretty sure of ourselves, and then we filed in January 2020, May 2020, a complaint which we were certain to lose. We were absolutely certain that we are going to lose this case, because all the regulator, all the courts in Poland, what they do is they copy-paste what the regulator is saying. It's probably not the same in Germany, but in Poland, actually it was like only just said in the opposite room that we're having our EU funds withheld because of the state of our courts. Our courts are just copy-pasting what the regulator is saying. So if you are fighting with a regulator, you lose, because he is the regulator. He has the stamp, official one. Anyway, we went through all the I don't know the English word, but you have the regional court, then you have the higher court. We lost both cases, and then you can go to the National Supreme Court, and we're also certain to lose that, and we wanted to go to the European Court of Justice. That was actually my wife's dream, to go to the European Court of Justice and somehow make the same impact that the Canavape did, which has the implications throughout the continent, or actually throughout the European Union. When we got the ruling, our lawyers called us and said, unfortunately, we won. And it's not only the ruling itself. you will get, like maybe I will just go there. If you want to read the full ruling, you can just scan it and you will go to the English translation of the ruling. Obviously, the Polish one is legally binding, but you can get the idea from the English one. It was translated by European Industrial Hemp Association. It's not only the ruling itself, which says, I will get the extract later, which says that basically we were right. It was also the wording. And as anyone that has anything to do with law knows, it's not only the one sentence, it's also the feeling around it. And it was, the wording is very, very strong in favor of our position. It happened actually almost 2 years ago now, but it took half a year for the legal proceedings to end so that the ruling is final, because until the ruling is final, there's no ruling, essentially. But then since February 2022, last year, so over a year now, the ruling is final. It cannot be reversed and it cannot be changed, and it cannot not be applied. So a few parts of it. Unfortunately, Poland is neither any European country bar UK, which is not Europe anymore by European Union definition. We don't have a case law. I don't know if that's the correct word, but basically if one court ordered something, it doesn't mean that the next one cannot disregard it. But that's the Supreme Court. It's not the regular court. So no public administration body can disregard this interpretation within the Polish border. Allegedly, there's something called the single European market. So it should be actually have implications throughout European Union, because the Maastricht Treaty is clearly saying that if a product is legal in one country, it can be marketed in all the other countries. But then again, there's an asterisk saying about public safety rules. So every country can actually say, yeah, there's a single market, but we don't believe that's a threat to our public safety, blah, blah, blah. So it has not got the implications throughout Europe. So that's why I'm saying we're not that happy that we have won this. But how can it get any clearer than the second quote? This plant has a history of use and does not constitute a novel food. Nothing to add here. Like, they were so, it was not a technicality, because we often, I fight a lot with public authorities, and we usually win on technicalities. Someone made a mistake and we win by that. That's not a case of someone making a mistake. That's actually a case of someone finally reading what we have written instead of copy-pasting the regulator position. And the word unauthorized overinterpretation here is very important, because that's what many people in the industry are doing. We ourselves, we as people that sell CBD products, we should be the first ones to actually believe that hemp is not novel food. Quite the opposite. Many of us are advocates of novel food applications, meaning we agree that it is a novel food and we want to prove that this is a safe novel food. Proving that your novel food is safe takes several years, several millions of euro, and it's actually in many cases close to impossible. And one important part, during these proceedings you cannot sell your products. And if you say, I'm applying for safety assessment of my novel food, it clearly says, I believe this is a novel food, and which means you cannot sell it by the time you get the safety assessment. So one important remark here, it was that all the court case was about a raw, well, decarboxylated but a hemp flower with W, not AOU, not flower from seed cake, but flower as the biomass, CBD containing green parts of the plant. We don't have this problem in Polish, like it's kwiaty or mąka. So the ruling in some place, if you've scanned it and you read it, it's like 20 pages of legal bullshit. But if you read it, it says that this ruling does not apply to extracts. This is about flowers, about the biomass. I will talk a few words about later how we're dealing with that with our CBD oils. And then obviously the technical part as well. The Supreme Court has seen that if a public body is not actually reading the arguments of the business person, it's actually bordering on illegal actions, because some of the proof that the Supreme Court allowed that says, okay, this is not a novel food, they knew it before. They had those documents before and they hid it. And it's actually, we have evidence of that. So in a normal country, we should countersue them again because that's a criminal offense if you're a public official and you're hiding documents. But we are not a normal country, so we're just not suing them. We are actually not even allowed, even though we have won this case, we are not allowed to sue for damages, legal technicalities against us this time. And the most important part, apart from the ruling itself, there is a history of consumption of hemp herb both as food and a supplement to normal diet. This thing allows me to sell, and not only me, it's not a ruling for Kombinat Konopny, for Mr. Kowalski, it's a ruling for the industry, at least in Poland. And we know for a fact that the implications of it were that all the legal proceedings against every company in Poland were dropped when it comes to novel food. Obviously they switched to, well, now we think it's unsafe because of THC, or now we think it's unsafe because of something else. But basically, that's what happened. And about the history, it's not like we've been trying to prove something because it's in our business interest. Obviously it is, and obviously it was a part of it, but it really was a part of our diet. Since I'm working with fiber now, and Poland used to be a huge producer of fiber. We used to have 30,000 hectares of hemp. And I've been asking this guy who was working in the 70s, okay, you've been collecting fiber, but what about the flowering tops? 30,000 hectares of flowering tops of cannabis, of hemp, which was not below 0.2 back then. It was closer to 0.5 or 1% THC. So what were you doing with all those flowering tops? And the answer was, we were giving it to our cows, to our chickens, to our beef. If you give flowering tops of hemp to your cattle and then you drink this milk, you are actually microdosing CBD and THC. And it's also not just my crazy idea, it's a fact. Then again, hemp seed oil, which was an essential, a traditional part of our diet, still is, and even the European Commission admits it is. They didn't have brand new combine harvesters back then, which were cleaning the seeds perfectly. They were pressing uncleaned hemp seeds. And if you take the seeds with the remaining parts of trichomes on it, and then you squeeze out the oil, it actually has something like 0.1 CBD, 0.2 CBD, close to nothing. But if you're taking a spoonful of it every day with your meal, you are actually supplementing CBD. And the amounts we're talking, 10, 20 milligrams per day, they were, at least in our part of the world, because we were growing hemp throughout Europe for the last several centuries, we are actually the first generation, maybe the second generation, that does not have cannabinoids in their diets. Something to think about when speaking with the European Commission. You've mentioned that everyone here knows what novel food is, but how many of you have actually read the directive? 10% of you. We all take for granted things that the lawyers are saying us, and I have a very complex relationship with the lawyers because they basically want us to need them rather than just say, well, it's not novel, period. But they're overcomplicating things often. So yeah, I'm not here to bash the lawyers, so maybe I'll just skip that part. If there are any important parts of that, I will switch to the next bit. Yeah, there was still one. Yeah, and there was a history of changes in the definition in the catalog of novel foods. There is like on the website of the European Commission, there's a catalog of novel foods, and you can type in something, and they were actually trying to change history, which technically speaking the Soviets did, the Nazis did, and now why on earth is the European Commission trying to change their own ideas of history? Because if you have the entrance to the catalog, and in the year 2015 you are saying hemp flowers have history of use, And then in 2016, they're saying, well, no, it does not anymore. How can you change the history? I have some background information on how that happened, because I used to work in Brussels, not for the European Commission itself, but close enough. And in 2016, when I had my first clash with the regional authority, I went to DG Health and asked for help. It is a normal thing in Brussels. Those of you who have any experience in working with them know that you can just go in from the street and ask for a meeting with the European Commission. They're actually granting those requests, so everyone can use it, just most people don't know about it. And they told me, like the important guys at DG Health, that their real reasoning is don't make products with more CBD than the material itself. So they are okay with CBD oils that have 5% CBD, but they're not okay with products that have 30% CBD. Why? I don't know, but that's their line of thinking. Right now, if you Google novel food and enter, not novel food CBD, novel food cannabis, novel food period, the European Commission website is saying that they are not okay with products containing more of the active substance than the raw material itself. So even for raw materials that have history of use, they are not completely happy with the products that are significantly raising this level. And that is one way of actually being novel food compliant. If you make a simple extraction, because extraction is allowed, they had this idea that maybe they should allow single-step extraction. Some of us are doing single-step extractions, but many of us are actually constantly changing the crude extract and then isolating it, refining it. If you isolate pure CBD by several steps, which leave trace amounts of contaminants of the solvent that you're using, there is some argument that it might be considered novel food. There is no history of use of CBD isolate. You might argue that, well, CBD isolate coming from nature is basically the same thing as just consuming the flower itself, but in here I can actually see the reasoning of European Commission that if you're raising it too high, it's no longer a natural product. So again, the QR code for the ruling itself, and they changed it quickly. Like they changed the wording again in the catalog, so there's no longer an entrance saying that you cannot exceed the natural level of cannabinoids, because it was unenforceable. What is a natural level of cannabinoids? How they are actually proof that 5% is okay, but 8% is not okay, or why 8 is okay and 20 not okay? Immediately people will start bringing, me included, genetics from other countries, from the US or whatever, and saying, well, yeah, I can get 30% CBD. Or you can actually provide a flower sprinkled with isolate and say, well, they have no way of implementing it. So also because of my aim of making the product as affordable as possible, because when I started in 2014, there were maybe tens of thousands of people using CBD in a country. We have 40 million inhabitants. Right now, we have recently done a public opinion poll, like a professional one with an external company, and they said between 1.5 and 2 million people are using CBD products regularly, meaning at least once a month. It is no longer a niche product. It is a product for everybody, which means it cannot be prohibitively expensive. I also had a personal reason for that, because I was sacked from my previous company and I wanted to have a source of CBD. I didn't want to buy a product from my previous company that treated me badly, and I didn't want to buy products from other companies because I knew they were not doing it according to my level of safety or quality. So I tried to do it in my kitchen, my home. I don't have a CO2 extraction facility at home. Making it with ethanol was one solution, but actually there was someone mentioned not trying to reinvent the wheel today. The Italians and people all over the world were using maceration infusion for centuries to make flavored oils. If you take the oil and you put garlic in it, or you put peperoncino, you get a flavored oil. You actually can do the same with cannabis. If you put cannabinoids are so lipophilic that they go immediately to the oil. So if you take, and I'm actually promoting it in Poland, just grow your own. That's my sales pitch. Don't buy from me, just grow your own and just make it an oil at home. because you take your CBD flowering top, decarboxylate it if you want a decarboxylated product, or just treat it raw if you want a raw product, get a lot of oil into it, let it sit for a couple of days, filter it out, all the cannabinoids will be in the oil in its natural state. And that is the way you're actually making a novel food compliant product. You take a product that there is a legal confirmation that it is a traditional food, and then you take a traditional single step method of actually processing it, and you make the oil that has, some people call it cold pressed, because obviously if you do it at home, you just add, let's say, 5 kilos of oil for 1 kilo of flour, and then you just use gravity to filter it out. But if you want to make it professionally, you don't want this waste, because you cannot press that much oil, so you just press it mechanically, physically press it out. A very traditional way, and an alternative to alcohol or CO2 extraction. And it doesn't change a bit in the composition of cannabinoids. And that's, I know that in the legal world, it's what's written in the law that's more important, but when you're actually dealing with the European Commission, it's also important to know how they are thinking. And this is in line with their thinking. You just don't change the parameters of how nature intended it. What we are doing is we use 1 kilo of oil per 1 kilo of flour. So even assuming 100% extraction, which you can never achieve 100%, you end up with the same levels of cannabinoids as in the raw material. Which means if you're working like with 7-8% CBD biomass, you end up with 7-8% oil. Is that competitive with 20-30-50% CBD oils that are on the market? Yes, because most of them are done by just putting isolate, which is, in my opinion, worthless. Obviously, there are some particular solutions in which they are important. Basically, that's what I wanted to say. The organizer told me not to ask for questions, so I will not be asking for questions, but there will be a roundtable discussion, I guess, immediately afterwards. Right now, yeah, so if there are any questions, just feel free, and thank you.
Didn't expect that.